All right, we're here with Dr. Newman, one of my favorite principals and very highly regarded around the district. Somebody who will probably at some point in the near future be at the district office. Dr. Newman, tell me a little bit about, just in general, your philosophy on leadership.
Well, I have a distinct belief that leadership in particular, it's important to use the metaphor that I talk about is to be able to be on the balcony and on the dance floor at the same time. When you're dancing on the dance floor, you can see your partner and maybe see what's happening next to you, but you really don't have a sense of what's happening all around the room. When you're up on the balcony looking down, you can see how everyone's moving in and out, connecting with one another and the flow around the room. To be an effective leader, I think you need to be able to be on the balcony and at the dance floor at the same time. And I think that's an important metaphor as we think about being able to connect to all the people that you work with in your organization. I also think leadership is really important about creating the capacity for people to be successful. And that means at times the values they hold and the work in which they're doing may conflict. And it's really important to create a holding capacity. In other words, just enough anxiety where people work at their optimum level but can feel satisfied and appreciated and encouraged in their work. So I'm one who does actually believe there's a certain amount of anxiety that's helpful. For instance, when many of us go to speak, make a public speech or talk to a group, we feel it in our lungs or in our head or somewhere, and we go to the outer space. An effective leader can teach someone and a group how to keep that anxiety just at the functioning level rather than go to outer space in particular.
I love it. Something that we talked a lot about in class on our first night is Marzano and his work in leadership. And one of the things that we were all very surprised about, but then after talking through it, we're kind of thinking, well, maybe this does make sense, is that a lot of his meta-analysis on leadership has shown that leadership really doesn't make that much of an impact in the classroom in terms of student achievement. And we were discussing one of the articles you actually sent me, which is, this idea of the principal being the instructional leader, which they're not oftentimes. What does that mean to you?
Well, let me even back up to the beginning is what impact does a leader have? I think first and foremost, you can read all the research, you can talk about what it all means, relationships are key. If you're in an organization that has someone who knows all the leadership skills, but has no relationship with their employees or staff, you're not going to be nearly as successful. So I think building relationships is really important in particular. And then the next piece about being an instructional leader, you need to stand for something. One of my former staff emailed me from a former school and said, I've been thinking a lot about where our school's at now, and the one thing you said in a meeting when we were having a difficult time is, she said, you put your foot down and you said, we need to stand for something. And what that something is, we need to all hold dear to us. And I think that's really important, is to have that connection with everybody in your organization. But also, there's a piece of research that's just out recently and really talks about the impact leaders have is being inspiring, motivational, and connecting. And if you look at those pieces, an effective instructional leader leads by example, knows pedagogy, knows what's expected in the classroom, knows how to coach, which is different than mentoring, knows how to push on the right leverage points, knows how to build relationships, knows how to pull a team together, but it's not you alone. One of the big dichotomies I struggle with is, do you lead from the front or do you lead from the rear? And it's a really good point when we think about leadership is how do we move a group forward? And that's really kind of a good piece to think about in leadership is how do we move a group forward when all the values don't necessarily connect, when we have a vision, when there's not one way is the best way. The more ideas on the table, the better the smarter the outcome is.
Love it. So one of the things, we'll end on this, one of the things that we just talked about very briefly before I even turned the camera on is that book, Primal Leadership. And in my program, that was something that really made an impact on me in this idea of resonance and dissonance. And so I guess my question for you is, when you're dealing with a difficult situation, whether it's a challenging issue with a staff member, a parent, a student, and this kind of call to create resonance in whatever situation you're in, what kind of strategies do you use?
Well, let me begin. Every decision I make with the concept of integrity is important. At the end of the day, the way I respond is the way if I was in the same position, I'd want someone to respond to me. But when we talk about dissonance in particular, that's that concept I talked about earlier about people's values may not be in conjunction with the work they're doing. So it's the difference between theories in use and theories in actions. In other words, we say we believe something, but when we look at our actions, if we were able to sort of have this out-of-body experience and look at our actions, there often is a huge disconnect between what we say we believe and what we do. So let me give you an example. If you talk to almost any teacher, they'll tell you they believe every child can learn. But if you look at their actions, in particular, oftentimes there's an unconscious bias on how they respond to different kids. The kid who comes in who maybe doesn't come from a literate home or has certain issues. their expectations are quite different. So when you help people to name that and really look at that, that's how they grow. So in short, when there's a difficult situation, when we come there, I've got to figure out what's the threshold for that person to be able to, once again, to hold that anxiety and move forward rather than go to the stratosphere. Once they go to the stratosphere, the conversation ends and people can't hear nor handle change.
Love it. Okay, so last words of advice for future leaders.
I think you need to know who you are as a person, not run from it. Know that you have areas to grow on. Know what your strengths are, and be really honest and direct with your staff. Know what your core values are, and most importantly, lead with integrity.
Love it. Good job, dude.